Hello, I haven't made a video for this Facebook group, a video lesson in a really long time. I've been so busy this year, but I really wanted to go back to something that I talked about earlier this year, which actually one of the students asked for, and that is will. So the verb will. It's a really interesting little verb. It isn't really very well understood by non-native speakers, and in my opinion, it isn't always well presented in course books. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about the kind of core basic meaning of will, and then I'm going to show you why we can use will to talk about not only the future, but also the present, and even more strangely, also the past. So let's have a look at will. Okay, so the core meaning of will. Definitely we can use will to talk about the future, but it's more complicated than that. And I think that learners sometimes think will is the future word, and it isn't. We don't even use it. We certainly don't use it for all situations in the future. And there's certainly more going on with will than just it's the word for the future. Will allows us to talk about the inevitability of a situation from the perspective of the present. This word inevitable, if something is inevitable, that means it will happen. It is going to happen. There is no chance that this won't happen. Okay, and if we talk about the perspective of the present, we're really talking about how we see things now, in our situation now. So will basically lets us talk about things we think are inevitable based on how we understand things today. And this is why we can use will in those instant decisions that course books like to talk about. So things like, it's so hot, I'll open that window. Opening the window, it's an inevitable consequence of being so hot. Maybe if you live in a country with air conditioning, you might say, oh, it's so hot, I'll turn the aircon on. But the second action is that of course you would do that. You wouldn't put the heating on. So it's inevitable that action B will happen because of the situation in action A. So on the next slide here, I'm going to talk about something. This is a real conversation I had with a student very recently. So this student is from a big city in China called Guangzhou, very big city. And in the lesson, the student said to me something like, there are lots of new COVID cases in Guangzhou. And my answer was, well, there will be. And the student was very, very confused and said, but I'm talking about the present. I'm not talking about the future. And I thought, well, I'm talking about the present too. So the question really is, why did I use will to talk about something that is quite clearly happening in the present? And this use of will, again, it's talking about inevitability, right? So in my opinion, in a city as big as this, it is inevitable that the number of COVID cases is increasing. So I can use will to express this inevitability despite the fact that the situation is present. So again, we've got situation A, which is us looking at things from our current point of view. And the second situation is this rise in cases, which is inevitable based on this first situation. Now things get really interesting because we're going to look at using will to talk about the past. Now, I'm going to share with you another real conversation I had with a colleague of mine. And we were talking about this man here. And this is a man named Lord Lucan. And in 1974, the body of his children's nanny was found in the basement of the house. Lord Lucan himself disappeared. Nobody ever saw him again. He was later found guilty of the murder of the nanny. He wasn't there, he was absent. And since 1974, there have been lots of sightings of Lord Lucan, but none have been verified. So really, nobody knows what happened to Lord Lucan after the murder. And me and my colleague were talking about this, and this is our conversation. So we can see again that this first one, clearly, this is a past time situation. But the response, I reckon he'll have wondered. This is using will. So what is going on with this? How can I use will in a sentence that clearly talks about something from the past? Well, I can do this because I am expressing what I believe is the inevitable, the logical inevitability of what happened to Lord Lucan. In my opinion, there is no other solution. He'll have wandered around the earth until he died, going from one country to another country. And again, we have this idea of this is situation A, Lord Lucan disappears, nobody sees him again. Well, for me, the logical, inevitable connection is that he wandered around the world, traveling, fake passports, fake ID, all that stuff. Here's one more example. A couple of weeks ago, I went on holiday, and my little dog went to my mum's house. Now, my dog loves my mum's garden. My mum has a beautiful garden, and my dog spends all day out there when she can. So I know that my dog will have spent the whole week chilling out in this beautiful garden. And again, here's a past situation where there's an inevitable fact that the dog has spent all this time in the garden, and this inevitable fact is expressed with will. So to do this, to talk about past situations and inevitability, we use will plus have plus past participle, also known as verb 3. And this is nuts because it's the same form, the exact same form as the future perfect. So think of will as a modal verb, right? Modal verbs would, should, could, may, might, ought to, all those kinds of words. And we use these words to make the modal perfect. Modal verb plus have plus past participle. I would have come to the party, but I was ill. I should have done my homework, but I forgot. So this modal perfect, it's the only way that we can use a modal verb in the past. The modal verbs don't have past forms themselves. They have to be joined up with have and a past participle. And if you just think that will is really another modal verb, then of course we can put it into this modal perfect and use it to talk about the past. So I hope that was helpful for you. I hope that was interesting. Any questions, any comments, please feel free to ask. I understand that this is a slightly unusual bit of grammar, so I'm very happy to discuss this with you. Equally, if you disagree with my interpretation of will, please do let me know. I'm happy to talk about these things as always. Thank you for watching.